I have to say, in the world of things that we'll probably never know anything about, rongorongo is close to the top for me. And on today's episode of Life's Potluck Buffet, I'm going to talk a little bit about rongorongo, and we're going to ask the cards about what we can get righto in our lives and ask for some advice about that. I'm John Paulus. You're listening to Life's Potluck Buffet only on YouTube. If you're enjoying Life's Potluck Buffet, please subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, thank you. And if you have a Brave browser, you can contribute basic attention tokens to Life's Potluck Buffet with John Paulus through the browser. Thank you all for your support, and thank you all for listening. The title of today's episode of Life's Potluck Buffet is a play on a title of a song from the 70s, If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right. It's a great song, and it's been recorded by a whole bunch of artists. And besides sounding like the name of the writing system that is called rongorongo, it also has something in common with it, insofar as we may never know what it originally sounded like. Why is that? Well, the song, If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right, was first recorded by a group called The Emotions. And that recording has never been released. And I'm not sure that the recording is even still around. So it may be gone for good, or it may be released at some point in the future. That happened with another recording of the song by an artist named Vita Brown, who recorded it in the 70s, but it wasn't released until 2008. In fact, I'll put that recording in the description so you can listen to Vita Brown's version of it. Ultimately, it was Luther Ingram's version that reached number one on the R&B and soul charts in the 1970s. And in a cool kind of second life, the song also hit number one in the country charts when later in the 70s, Barbara Mandrell did her version of it. But we may never know what the Emotions version sounded like. And the same is true for whatever the language is underneath the writing system that is called rongorongo. On yesterday's episode of Life's Potluck Buffet, I talked about Voynich, that writing that was in that manuscript from the 1400s. We don't know what any of that says and probably won't, but we could know a lot more about it than we can know about rongorongo. So let's talk about today's unlikely to ever be deciphered writing and ever to be understood language. And that's rongorongo. So rongorongo is the name that the people of Rapa Nui gave to this system that was used by their ancestors to write something. We don't quite know what any of the texts say. We don't know what the symbols mean, if they're logograms, ideograms, if they're, how it works. We know a little bit about how it works, and I'll get to that in a moment, but we don't really know what it says at all. And I say we know a little bit about how it works is because we have a sense, just because of the way the figures look, of what directions to read it in, and that's just pretty much it. So you might be asking about Rapa Nui. That is commonly called in English Easter Island, but its name is Rapa Nui, and that is the place where there are those very large figures, human figures with very kind of large heads and smaller bodies, and they're called moai, and there are a lot of them, and that's so you might have seen pictures of moai, or maybe you visited Rapa Nui, but that's where we're talking about. And this is an island that is one of the most remotest, one of the remotest islands that's inhabited in the world. The closest place that has people on it is Pitcairn Island, which is a long way away. 1,300 miles 2,000 kilometers. And Pitcairn Island has 35 residents as of 2023. So not too many people on Pitcairn Island. The closest place to a large kind of populous country is Chile, which is about a little more than 2,000 miles away from Rapa Nui. And the Rapa Nui have a name for the writing that you can see in the thumbnail of today's episode. I give a sense of a couple of three characters in of rongorongo. The Rapa Nui call it rongorongo because rongorongo means chanted or chanted out or recited, and so it's from an oral tradition that talks about these various kind of, I'll call them tablets, although a lot of them are carved on wood of various shapes and are not necessarily tablet shape. I mean, there's things that are shaped like oars. There are things that are shaped like other wooden panels. There are things that are actually statuettes, I think we would call them, that have rongorongo on them. And there are also similar glyphs in the many stone glyphs of Rapa Nui that resemble rongorongo writing, and that's fun to say. And we actually have evidence of a document that was signed by a Rapa Nui person in 1770, but there's been no way of connecting rongorongo to the Rapa Nui language in a clear way that would say, oh, well, this is, because that's a thought, right? That this script is proto Rapa Nui language, and it must be something like that, but it's not clear how. And so that's very interesting too, because this is one of these cases of kind of hiding in plain sight. We have an extremely isolated island, a writing system that may be one of the world's only original writing systems. And what I mean by that is that it wasn't borrowed from another system. Like in the case of, say, the letters that you look at when you look at the title of this YouTube video, you are looking, or look at the description. Those letters are borrowed from an alphabet that was created 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 from some signs in the Nile Valley in Africa. And so those signs, those first marks that out of which, say, Egyptian hieroglyphs developed, out of which the Canaanite alphabet developed, out of which the Greek alphabet developed, out of which the Latin alphabet developed, out of which the Italic alphabets developed, out of which the old Futhark alphabet developed, out of which the English language's alphabet developed. And all of those systems owe themselves to that early development of writing in Africa. And that's one system. There are only a handful in the whole world of original, independent writing systems that we know about. And there's a really, really, really good chance that rongorongo is one of them. To me, that's mind-blowing. The idea that here on a small island in the middle of the southeastern Pacific Ocean, you can find an example of an independently developed writing script. The only unfortunate thing is that we may never know, we'll probably never know, what it says. Something that's neat about rongorongo, that is one detail that we may know about it, is that it was read in a pattern that is called reverse boustrophodon. Now you're saying, well, oh, John, of course, if it was just normal boustrophodon, I would understand what you're talking about. But reverse boustrophodon, that's crazy. Now, so let me just get to what boustrophodon is first. If you don't know what it is, if you do, then you can tune out for a little bit. So boustrophodon, it means Greek like an ox plows, and the idea here is that when you read something, say, for example, you start reading something left to right on a line, and then the next line you go around and you start reading it right to left from where you ended up at the end of the first line. You drop down one line and then start reading right to left, and then you drop down another line you're on the left side now, and then you read left to right, and so on and so forth. That's called boustrophodon. So if you're plowing a field later on with a team of oxen, notice how when you turn from one furrow to another, you are basically going back and forth in opposite directions. So that's how the boustrophodon works. But a reversed boustrophodon is you read one line, and in the case of rongorongo, you start from the bottom. You start from the bottom of the thing you're reading, and then you apparently flip the thing you're reading 180 degrees so that it's now upside down from where it was, and then you read the next line that way. So it's basically the reason we know this is because we have these fluted, inscribed wooden objects that have some of the figures are upside down compared to some of the others. So that's really about all we can know about rongorongo. There have been obviously there have always been a lot of attempts at decipherment of this writing system, but there's a particular inscription that may have something to do with a lunar calendar. There's some sense that might be the case, but again, none of this is written in stone. None of it is written in stone. It's actually mostly written in wood, but there are some characters in that are written in stone. But the point is that there's no time soon are we going to be able to know what these rongorongo texts say. And I think that there is a much greater chance that we'll be able to understand what Voynich is as a system, what the language is underneath Voynich's writing is long before we know what rongorongo documents say. Even though, it's one of these things, it's a lot like the Voynich's writing system. It's hiding in plain sight. I mean, here we know where it's from. We know that it had to be a language of that island. And we know that the modern language, Rapa Nui, it was highly influenced by Tahitian languages. So that throws it off because that means that we don't have access to the pre-Tahitian language of Rapa Nui, which means that that's kind of lost forever, or very likely lost forever. And there's a chance that something emerges. There's always a chance, but it's very low chance. Whereas I think with Voynichese, there's a better chance of being like, well, this is an artificial language based on following principles, or this is an encoded version of, some language. That we have a better chance at Voynichese than we do at rongorongo, even though the chances are slim with Voynichese, but with rongorongo, they're probably much closer to zero, which there's no such thing as zero, but it's close. So let's ask the cards, which I can read, what they have to say about all of this. So yellow lemons, blue dumplings, magenta noodles, cards, tell us some things. All right, here we go. Oh, it's card number 3. That's Life's Potluck Buffet rule number 3. That story you just told about someone else was about you. When we speak ill or well of others, we ought to consider in what way we are talking about ourselves to ourselves. Pay close attention to the stories you tell about others, both when you complain about them and when you praise their actions. By understanding what others do that either annoys you or pleases you, you can learn what you do that is annoying or what you want to be praised for. So think about what story you just told about someone else and how it was really about you. And I'll see you tomorrow on Life's Potluck Buffet, where I'll talk about the final writing that no one is ever going to read. And this one is even closer to zero chance than rongorongo.